A ceasefire between the two main rivals of a global trade war. The US and China have struck a complicated deal to de-escalate a soaring tariff face-off that had nations on the edge. So will the agreement reverse fears of a global recession, and can it revive world business sentiment? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Elizabeth Puranam. The world's two biggest economies have stepped back from the brink after imposing retaliatory tariff hikes at rates never seen before. The US and China have agreed to a truce. Some of the levies have been scrapped altogether, while others have been put on hold. After weeks of considerable strain, many people are looking to see how global supply chains will be affected. Is it the end of the global trade war triggered last month by President Donald Trump? And what does it mean for those countries who were eyeing big investments due to steep duties on China? We'll address those questions with our expert guest soon, but first, Imogen Kimber reports.
After 2 days of talks in Geneva, a pause in the trade war between the two biggest economies in the world, the United States of America and China. Since coming to office in January, President Donald Trump imposed US import tariffs on almost every country in the world, saying he wants to reset the trade deficit of the United States, creating fears of a worldwide recession. But the impact was mostly felt by the US's largest trading partner, China. The two countries account for around $600 billion worth of trade, and the trade conflict disrupted global supply chains.
The world today is undergoing accelerated transformations unseen in a century, with multiple risks intertwined and overlapping. Only through unity and cooperation can countries safeguard global peace and stability and promote worldwide development and prosperity. There are no winners in tariff wars or trade wars. Bullying will only lead to self-isolation.
After more than a month of reciprocal increases in levies, the US agreed to reduce tariffs on Chinese imports from 145% to 30%, and China cut levies on US imports from 125% to 10% for 90 days.
We opened up our country to China. They have very few restrictions, and they didn't open their country to us. Never made sense to me. It's not fair. And they've agreed to open China, fully open China. And I think it's going to be fantastic for China. I think it's going to be fantastic for us.
Following the announcement, stock markets bounced back up. But US tariffs remain higher than before, with potential duties on specific items like pharmaceuticals, along with a lot of uncertainty. And Trump is also rolling back on tariffs between the UK and the US. Many of his supporters say this turnaround shows how the President of the United States works and displays his mastery of the art of the deal. But after months of global economic turmoil, not everyone agrees. Imogen Kimber, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Well, let's bring in our guests from Los Angeles. William Li, Chief Economist and Executive Director of the Milken Institute. From Beijing is Huiyao Wang, founder of the Center for China and Globalization. And from Manila, Jayanth Menon, visiting senior fellow at the IC's Yusof Ishak Institute and former lead economist at the Asian Development Bank. A very warm welcome to all of you. William, I'll start with you in Los Angeles. Many economists say that the drop in levies is much higher than expected. What do you think?
Well, I think the reason for these levies is because President Trump has a very ambitious agenda to reshape the global financial system in a way that's more appropriate for 21st century trade. The system as it was set up by the U.S. after World War II, where there was only one healthy economy on the planet. Here we have growing middle-class countries like Brazil and countries in the Middle East that really have very different trading needs than they did before. China and the U.S. represent the two largest trading partners in the world, and I think the President Trump wanted to have discussions with everyone so that we can have a different trading system that was more appropriate, recognizing, as President Xi said, that the world has transformed and we need to cooperate. The type of cooperation now is different than before, more bilateral and regional trade agreements instead of one big multilateral package, which is not good for anybody.
But he talks a lot less about reshaping the global trading system than he does about trade deficits and trade imbalances with other countries, doesn't he? Huiyao, if I can bring you in, there is a significant drop in levies. The vast majority of tariffs that were announced after the so-called Liberation Day have been scrapped altogether. The ones that remain are slightly higher than they were before Trump launched this trade war. Do you think he's achieved anything?
Well, I think President Trump has a good try. Of course, he's generally interested for the MAGA, for Make America Great Again, and he felt that maybe the old pattern doesn't really work for American advantage now, and so he's trying something new. But I think he's too ambitious, too aggressive, and also too long arms everywhere, and which in itself defeated its purpose, and also isolated the U.S. and also the stock market was tumbling, and confidence was declining, and of course also ports are starting to get less busy, and of course most important, consumer they're waiting for later of the year, Christmas, Thanksgiving, they're going to see an empty shelf of the supermarket, and more important. Those big giants like Apple, Tesla, Walmart, and all the rest really seen it's hurting themselves. Basically, there was about 1/3 of multinational was about 1/3 of import-export business in China. So I mean, also all the intermediary parts and all those connected, intertwined global economy is all suffering. It's well connected. Europeans suffering, and ASEAN, everybody. In the end, we defeat U.S. purpose, and that could be probably led to a great recession. And we remember that in the last century, 1929, and that leads to the war in the end. So I think it's great. I think U.S. has realized that and has quickly turned around. And I would like to really congratulate for his great efforts, and of course on the Chinese side as well, to make this thing coming down, and then we can have some stability, at least for several months down the road.
Yeah, it will be very interesting to see how long that stability lasts, because, of course, the cancellation, the suspension is just for 90 days. Jayant, how do you see this agreement? The White House statement said that the trade deal is a win for the U.S., that it demonstrates President Trump's unparalleled expertise in securing deals that benefit the American people. Will this deal that's in place now, how much do you think it will benefit the American people? The 30% tariffs on Chinese imports remain. Surely that will increase how much Americans are paying for so many things that are imported from China.
Yes, exactly. I mean, this is not a deal. This is a ceasefire after an unprovoked attack by the United States on China, and indeed on all trading partners, for no good reason. So I can't see how anyone can describe this as a deal. It's just, the U.S. has been forced to back off a little bit, and I'm glad they have, because I don't think this is the way to treat your trading partners, to come in unilaterally and assault them with WTO inconsistent increases in tariffs, which are only been allowed because of a self-manufactured national emergency, apparently, in the U.S. So this is not good politics, it's not good international relations, and it's really bad economics. So,
Jayant, what do you mean by a self-manufactured? What do you mean? Can you elaborate on what you mean by a self-manufactured national emergency?
Well, President Trump has just declared a national emergency because apparently the U.S. is under attack by being cheated by all these other trading partners. I mean, there's no national emergency. This is the only way in which you can get to do these sorts of things. So that's what I mean by that. But I think the point here is that we are now at 30% tariffs, higher than we were before Trump 2.0 started. And so how can this be any kind of movement towards an improvement in trading relations? And even this is only for 90 days. I suspect that this will be the first of many pauses because you can't do a deal in 90 days. Free trade agreements take years and years. It won't be a free trade agreement, but even any kind of deal, I think, will require a lot more time to trash out all the details. So I think this will be the first of many pauses. And, at the end of the day, I don't think the U.S. will keep to any deal struck anyway, because the ultimate objective is to balance trade, as they've stated, and that's not going to happen unless they completely shut the doors and don't do any trade. That would be balanced trade, but that's not feasible either. So I think we'll see this going on and on, but on the bright side, it's good that the suspension for 90 days is on,
Yes.
and hopefully things will improve. Yeah.
And William, what do you see being achieved in 90 days? Like Janth was saying, this is not an agreement or a deal. It is being called a framework structure, keeping in mind that it took the two sides during Trump's first term in office. It took them a lot longer than 90 days. Wasn't it nearly 2 years to come up with what was called that phase one deal? And even that wasn't comprehensive. And again, that was negotiated by the first Trump administration.
Well, let's remember that we are now starting with a tremendous base. I think both sides, the Chinese and the U.S. sides, hinted at returning to that trade framework and building on that. And let's remember that things were working well until China didn't agree to live up to its part of the bargain of opening up services sector for U.S. financial services and other services. And even the purchases it promised, it didn't fulfill. So there was a lot of lack of enforcement on the first part of the deal. And the reason why President Trump is trying to accelerate discussions is because we already have a firm foundation to build on. And unlike the multilateral deals of bureaucratic structures that Mr. Menon is used to and works in, we want bilateral discussions that are very rapid to conclude. We already have a firm foundation with China. We have a very firm foundation with the UK. And I think if we were serious about discussion, which is why high tariffs are in place as a threat, because we want to incentivize serious discussions and agreements that can be enforced and agreed upon quickly. And if they're not right, then they can be adapted quickly. That's the purpose of multilateral and regional agreements, as opposed to big multilateral packages that take years and decades to come to agreement on very, very little. So I think we have a lot to build on.
Let me bring Huiyao in on that point that you're making. Huiyao, what do you make of what William is saying, that the reason why they're having to renegotiate in Trump's second term with China is because China didn't stick to its end of the bargain with what happened during the first administration? William is saying that it didn't open up its market enough or fulfill some of the other key points. What do you say to that?
Well, I think that we did reach a phase one agreement during the first term of Trump, but we all know that COVID happened, and that at the end of his term, and that impact, China basically locked down for 3 years. Even China's own economy suffer enormously. So I think there's a force majeure impact there. It's not really. If it's a normal time, probably China, U.S. has already finished the phase one and maybe go to the phase two. But what I think is that this is a test of the human connectivity, and that we all realize now how tightly we are connected. We cannot separate. We cannot artificially put a trade war between us or between 100 some countries, particularly between the two largest economies of the world. It's already. We're not in the 19th century or 20th century. We're in the 21st century. And furthermore, U.S. actually is winning on the service trade. At $1 trillion service trade, 300 billion profit surplus. And then they are having the 6% of a green U.S. dollar as a reserve for all the other countries. And also they have a stock market running all-time high. All the investment comes to the U.S. And finally, also they have all the harvest all the talents. All the global talents goes to the United States. So they have all the high end. They are in the high tech, bioscience, artificial intelligence, digital economy. They just can't win every front. So they're talking about what they have abandoned in the past. Those heavy-duty, labor-intensive, environmental unfriendly. Now they want all that back. Everybody on assembly line with intensive labor. No American wants to do that. So I think a lot of things wishful thinking, but then when they put into practice, they got a lot of resistance, a lot of phone calls, a lot of industry lobby, and voters just use the stock market to show their displeasure. So I think they are really smart, and quickly they turn around, and I hope that we can all live with 10%. And also this 20% extra on the fentanyl. The former administration of Biden already did a lot of things with China, and the death rate of fentanyl last year dropped to 30% in the U.S. because of China's efforts. So I think that this just one reason they get attention of China to talk. But I think this 20% can be dropped very quickly.
Okay, Jayanth, we've got Huiyao talking about how, interconnected the world is, and that decoupling is just not possible now between the US and China. Because of that, we've seen stock markets around the world react to these trade tariffs, and they bounce back up following the announcement. But we don't know what will happen after the 90 days, end. So what does all of this uncertainty mean, not just for the market, but for businesses, not just in US and China, but again, in all those countries that are part of the same supply chains?
Yes, exactly. I mean, we live in a highly interdependent world, as already been mentioned, and we are, a global village. There's so much interconnectivity, especially with China's role in global supply chains. I mean, you cannot imagine a world in which you try and cut China out neatly and continue on as if it never existed. That's impossible. And it'll be extremely disruptive even to the US. And I wish they would realize that. But stock markets will go up and down, and I don't think we should use them as an indicator of whether policy is working or not. But I think what we have seen already is this tremendous amount of uncertainty resulting in the deferment of investment plans. You cannot make long-term investments in this environment, especially with the U.S. administration that's so erratic in its policy settings. You've had pauses, you have exemptions, and you have carve-outs, you have all these things happening, and it's impossible to make any kind of serious decision planning, investment planning and decision-making in this environment. And that means job losses are already on the cards. And unless this kind of uncertainty is dealt with, is removed, this will be very costly to firms in both the US, China, and elsewhere. I think this is something that we cannot continue in this way.
Jayanth, the escalation in the past had seen Chinese and foreign firms shift operations from China to Southeast and other parts of Asia. Does the trade war benefit anyone in Asia, or is it just not that simple, again, because of how integrated supply chains are, and nothing is just made in one place, or very few things are?
Right. Yes, I don't think there's very few manufactured goods are certainly not made in one place anymore. Some countries in Southeast Asia have seen large increases in foreign investment as these supply chains have reconfigured, and there's been a lot of relocation to avoid the earlier tariffs, the Trump 1.0 tariffs, and the escalation by President Biden. Actually, President Biden was the bigger protectionist than Trump 1.0, we know now, with the measures he brought in and the subsidies and export controls. But there are winners and losers always, but in the long term, this disruption is not good for anyone, really. And so I think that's the takeaway from all of this, that the uncertainty is not good for anyone.
Okay, William, economists have talked about how the recent deals we've seen between the US and China and last week between the US and the UK, that they might give us an idea of a cap and a floor of the kinds of tariffs that nations can expect from the US, given that with the UK, where it has the least imbalanced trade, that tariffs of 10% remain. It has the most imbalanced trade with China, which is getting tariffs of 30%, which of course include the 20% because of fentanyl. Is it reasonable that these two numbers set the bounds of where American tariffs could end up this year?
Well, Elizabeth, that's a very good question. In fact, that's exactly the point that I think President Trump has been trying to make from the very first day. He said to everyone at this Davos speech in January when he first came into office, invest in the U.S. and you become a partner with the U.S. and you have the benefit of lower taxes, fewer regulation, smaller government, and a protective barrier of tariffs to prevent unfair competition for your investments in the United States. And as Mr. Wang said, the United States is the center for the highest rates of return for global investors. And so it's a good deal. But if you choose to compete, you'll have to pay the price of entry to come to the United States with a tariff barrier. So I think the US and UK deal represents exactly that principle in action. Now the deal with China, or the framework that we are going back to with China, already understands that we are strategic dependencies between China and the U.S. that President Xi and President Trump had agreed upon for many years ago. And now this issue is implementation. How can strategic dependencies be put in place rapidly to the benefit of both countries? And that's only done with mutual respect on both sides. And I think the current negotiations with China definitely show the mutual respect that's there on both sides. So unlike what Mr. Menon is worried about, that when no one is trying to cut off China. In fact, we're trying to encourage China to invest in the U.S. the way the UK has, and allow U.S. investors to invest in China and increase the dependencies in a way that's healthy for both economies. And those are templates for every country in the rest of the world that can fit into that kind of range of investments. And we see Argentina already taking on many of the policies that President Trump has put in place. And I think we will see a lot of deals with Latin America and other regions of the world where the U.S. and those regional trade agreements will benefit all. And China has done the same principle in Asia, having many regional free trade agreements to have strategic alliances and strategic dependencies.
All right, we've only got about 5 minutes left in the program, and I'd like to get to a couple of other very important points. Huiyao, let me bring you in. There has been, like William has said, there's been a lot of talk from both sides about mutual respect and understanding, and yet we heard from President Xi Jinping today saying that bullying leads to self-isolation. The state media Xinhua news agency said China's goodwill and patience has its limits. Could you see China walking away from these trade talks with the U.S.?
Well, I think China always maintained the principle that let's talk. The door is wide open. But if we really no respect and if there's a bully, China is also well prepared for that. So I think that the trend actually happened in Geneva in the last 2 days was really great. I mean, both countries actually issued a statement, recognized there's a mutually beneficial exchanges and talks and highly cordial and friendly, better than everybody expected. So what I think is that maybe the next round is they're going to have this. Have another organization, probably Ministry of Homeland Security and Ministry of Public Security of both countries will talk soon on this fentanyl, and hopefully that 20% fentanyl can be quickly dropped as well. And I agree with you, Bill, that William just said, that let's reinforce the bilateral investment, which is the best way to cement further connectivity. And just like what the Japanese did in the 80s, 90s, have a massive investment in the U.S., where China is a lot of company interested in investing in the U.S. Unlike a U.S. company, 70,000 U.S. company invest in China, generating, billions, hundreds of billions of, business. And as a matter of fact, the U.S. company sells $400 billion more than the Chinese company selling in the U.S. That's already equaled the trade deficit. So if you really calculate, U.S. probably is on the positive side. So I think it's in both countries, and particularly, as China said, for the world interest to maintain this agreement and And, so both
Certainly
US and China
it is in both
economies
countries and,
should
of
have more
course, in
responsibility.
many other nations. I mean, the world's interest. But Jayanth, are you as optimistic? I mean, you've written in the past about how Trump's tariffs could lead not just to an all-out trade war, but the kind of situation that we saw in the US after the Great Depression in 1930, when it unilaterally imposed tariffs, around 900 tariffs, prolonging the Great Depression, and also seeing, trade contracting, world trade contracting by a startling 66% at that time.
Exactly. Yes. So we've been through this before. This is not something that's completely unknown to us, and this is why I think we shouldn't be surprised by what happens. We should learn from history. Tariffs have never worked to protect employment or support the kinds of objectives that are being trumpeted now. The lessons from history is that trade liberalization and openness has involved great improvements in living standards, in growth, in economic welfare. This level of tariffs that were proposed between US and China basically kills off trade. And now to say that they're coming together because they realize their strategic interdependence and they're reducing them for 90 days doesn't seem to make much sense to me. I think if you really recognize these sorts of things, you work together, right, in setting up a closer trading relationship. And also, I think it would be great if countries invested in each other, but then you can't then try and penalize value added in each other's countries.
All right, we have just 1 minute left, so let me give William the last word. How do you see this unfolding over the next 3 months, or is it impossible to predict because of Donald Trump?
I think Mr. Wang already predicted very well how the discussions will proceed. They will proceed very rapidly, and I agree with him, because China and the US see the mutual interest in going very rapidly. It's unfortunate that Mr. Menon refuses to see that tariffs were the things that incentivized these serious discussions, and they were not put on to protect, they were put on to incentivize cooperation. And that's exactly what's going on right now.
All right, I'm afraid that we have run out of time, but I'm sure that we'll be talking about this again in the near future. For now, I'd like to thank William Lee in Los Angeles, Huiyao Wang in Beijing, and Jayanth Menon in Manila. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, do go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Elizabeth Puranam, and the whole team here, bye for now.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.